Hello, welcome to Free Will, Science, and Religion. I'm Chandler Klebs, and I'm here with George Ortega, and we are talking again about the issue of fat shaming and obesity and how people are blamed by others and they blame themselves when they're overweight or something like that, because this is really important because um, people just say, "Oh, it's your own fault if you're fat. You choose to eat unhealthy. You choose to just sit around all day and never exercise." And and that's first of all, that's not really the case because even if people are quote unquote choosing to eat unhealthily, they don't know why they're doing it. They're not aware that what they're eating is unhealthy often. And even if they are aware, maybe there's an addiction. We know that sugar can be addictive, and people's habits die hard.
And Chandler, it's even, it's not, it's the healthier foods are a part of it, of course, but I think people just like people enjoy eating. So it's when you're enjoying eating, it's hard to stop. You have the one part of you says, "Oh, this is great, let me get some more." The other part of you saying, "Well, I better not eat too much because I don't want to gain weight." And the part that this is great, let me eat some more generally wins.
Well, yeah, you're right, George. See, the strongest desire is what ultimately ends up winning. Um, and so that's what happens is like sometimes people do have a massive change in their diet or a massive change in their exercise or whatever, but there usually has to be a tipping point of where one desire somehow there's some cause that pushes one desire to overpower the other. And and so this is true, what you said is true. I mean, people, they enjoy eating. I mean, that, and it's kind of interesting, but well, yeah, the fact that people have to eat and they've learned to enjoy it, and food, there's so many foods that taste good. And this is interesting because when you think about it, I think the example of food and eating is one that's different than other things because some things people can completely quit. Like people can completely quit smoking or drinking alcohol, and they can quit taking cocaine or whatever, and certain other things. But everybody has to eat something. Everybody has to eat some kind of food, and because of that, it's a very clear thing that most people get that you don't have the option to just stop eating altogether or you die.
Yeah, and I mean, I want the audience to understand the importance of this issue because like in in explaining to the world that nothing's up to us, that we don't have a free will, to a lot of people, we're kind of taking something from them that they value. People enjoy just basically getting credit or taking credit for the good they do, the achievements. And so like, we're kind of like battling against this kind of like, and naturally when people think it through completely, and that's the idea behind this. In other words, like if people saw the harm free will belief does, and again, this overweightness, like what 2/3 of Americans are overweight. I mean, I think if they can understand the free will belief, the harm it causes from this perspective of obesity and overweightness, then maybe they can say, well, yeah, fine, it's nice to be able to take credit for what we do, but but considering if we explain this within the perspective of weight, overweightness, I think they can really overcome their biases against understanding it and finally see. Chandler, explain why it's not up to us, whether we're overweight or not.
Yeah, we need to go briefly into this free will definition and refutation, I suppose, because people have this belief that their choices, whether it's regarding food or even other things in general, is up to them, that they either could do this or could do that, that they could have done otherwise than what they did. And the reason why this is is not the case is simple because our choices are causal. They're caused by prior events, what we know, what we don't know, what our desires, what we don't desire, what we're taught is moral or immoral, what our society lets us do without sending us to jail or not is part of it. Fear of consequences of something tends to keep us from doing certain things, and all these different factors, the pros and cons of every decision, it comes from prior causes over which we have no control because they stretch back to before we were born, before we were conceived, before our parents and grandparents, So we have zero control over all of it, but people just have this illusion. It's a very weak illusion, and yet still fools so many people because they feel like it's them doing it, even though they couldn't really have done otherwise.
Right. And so like basically what you just done is describe the logic of why we don't have a free will, relative to overeating and all. But I mean, like, I think we can present, overweightness is a great way for people to understand just from their experience, from their personal experience, that know how much they eat, especially when they're overweight, when they became overweight and they're trying to lose weight, that it's not up to them. So, in other words, like, if you ask any person, um, did you of your free will decide to become overweight? Let's say somebody's really overweight, 30, 40 pounds. I think people will say, no, no, that wasn't up to me. So then you ask, so then, you get them to understand, well, obviously, if that wasn't up to you, then how can you have a free will? Or like, let's say a person's really overweight, and naturally, so many of us, that are overweight want to lose the weight. And people who are overweight know how difficult that is. So the other thing to ask people is like, well, I mean, like, don't you think if you had a free will, all you'd have to say to yourself is, well, I'm going to lose this weight, and then every time you're eating, you just eat less or exercise more, whatever you have to do, and the weight would come off. I mean, this is a way for people to understand from their personal experience with something that I think a lot of people care about, that no, they don't have a free will. Things that are not in their control first cause them to eat too much, and then isn't allowing them to lose the weight.
Yeah, George, that's the thing is it's so simple. Um, I mean, of course, of course it's a lot more complicated from all the nitty gritty details of how the body works and the carbs and the sugar and all that. But the simple fact of the matter is, if people are armed with information of what they have to do, we'll assume that they're already armed with the information of what they have to do, and then it would be simple for them to all follow it and lose weight then, wouldn't it? If they,
Yeah, and
yeah.
I mean, and Chandler, we can simplify this. In other words, like, um, in my experience, when I try to lose weight, all I do is eat less. I mean, I don't, I really don't like eat certain kinds of. I mean, I try to stay away from sweets and stuff like that anyhow. But, in other words, like, if we had a free will and we're like, we know we want to lose weight, we would stop eating before we were full. We would stop eating when maybe we're three-quarters full or half full or something. So, like, again, the challenge to people who believe in free will is like, how can you have a free will when you can't even like stop eating when you want to?
Yeah, that's an important point. I mean, because people, you would think if they had this free will, like, I suppose if we asked most people, if you had a free will, don't you think that would let you eat less than you currently do? You
Be-
know?
Yeah,
And what's interesting about it is, first of all, there's a certain amount that people have to eat because if they don't eat hardly anything and they starve themselves, well, they die or they get severely malnutritioned. And also, there's also, let's suppose that a person was trying. This is a funny example, but let's suppose a person was trying to overeat. They would find that they would get full and could not eat anymore after a certain point, you know?
absolutely. That's another good point. And Chandler, we can also directly connect this to morality, because I think, being fit, being emotionally healthy in terms of not being overweight is also a moral issue. A lot of people are like religious, the body is the temple of God, or just like it's a moral thing to be healthy, you know, to take care of ourselves. So like that's another way that they can understand. Like they're trying to do something good. They're trying to maintain a healthy weight. So, but that's another example of how we can't be as good as we want to be, whether it's weight or whatever it is. So again, it's a perfect way for people to understand, through something they care about, something, so many people are trying to lose weight or keep a healthy weight. I mean that that's got to be a very powerful way. What do you think sometimes? I mean, what do you believe a free will believer could say to that to defend free will in light of let's say they're not being able to stop from gaining weight or just not being able to lose it?
Well, I'm not so sure if there is a good answer that they would have for that, but here's just my guess. My guess is that people would give this saying like, "Oh, well, I could do it if I wanted to, or if I try hard enough, I could do it, but I don't really care enough." Some people might say that. That's just a guess, um, but or perhaps because a lot of people, what they do is they believe that they have a free will, and so they're blaming themselves for not trying hard enough. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so then what happens is they're like some people will get what we're saying. Some people will get that it's not their fault and they will look to the causes that are compelling their behaviors. And so they might be able to find solutions. But people who are still stuck in the free will paradigm, they're just going to blame themselves and going to keep trying to use their free will or their willpower, whatever they call it, and they think that it's a simple matter of that. Um, but it's interesting because people are trying, George. Like people, they're looking for weight loss advice from magazines, from the internet. They're buying workout DVDs. They're joining gyms. They're trying to change their diets. People are trying these things, and sometimes people are. I mean, it's great because it's always good to try things. We're not against that because you trial and error eventually works if you find the thing that really works for you. Um, but sometimes people are not able to find the right uh, information, and it's so interesting because if it was as simple, like I think of course, there's a difference between simple and easy. I'll admit, there's a difference between something being a simple issue of what must be done to change something, and a level of easiness as how hard it is physically or emotionally to do. So,
Okay, so your point was that like basically people would say, well, I really could, eat less, but I don't want to enough. And that makes sense. I think some people will say that. I think another thing some people will say is like they'll compare it to like holding our breath. In other words, like we have this biological drive to breathe. And if we ever try to hold our breath for any amount of time, there'll come a moment where we will start breathing because this is like biological. This is like within us. So, so they might actually say, well, we have free will in other areas, but since like this eating or not eating is biological, then we can't overcome the dictates of our biology.
so what you're saying, George, is that some people will concede, well, sure, our free will doesn't allow us to control our eating or our breathing or other biological things, but then they somehow think that free will somehow apply in other areas. So, how do we answer that?
Well, Chandler, I think we need to like devote a special episode to, to kind of like separating what people believe they have a free will about and then what people understand or concede that they don't have a free will about, and then we want to compare the two. Why is it that we can like have a free will in some instances and not? I think it's complicated. I think we may need to like come up with a list. Some things are easy. Like I think people would recognize and know that we don't have a free will to like to stop breathing, things like that. So that may be part of it.
Yeah, yeah, George, because it's very easy for us because we've been studying this issue for so long, we understand that we don't have a free will in any area because it's incoherent. But other people have not investigated it, and so they still have this idea that there's one category of things where you do have a choice and other things you don't have a choice, and that they're separate somehow. So yeah, that's something that does need to be cleared up. But I also would like to point out that, I mean, but we are biological organisms. It's not like that there's some things that are biological about us and then some other things that are not, because what would that even mean? I don't get the concept of that.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So yeah, this is a tricky one, George, because I think what happens is that when it comes to obvious things, whether it relates to people's food intake or their sexual orientation and stuff like that, certain biological things, a lot of people get to where they understand that they don't have control over that, just as they don't control their what hair and skin color they're born with and gender and all that. But I think what happens, George, is people they have this idea that there's a mental realm, that the psychological realm is somehow different and that somehow that and that's what it's really about, George, is it's not about whether we're free physically in the way it's like, you know what I'm saying, George. It's about whether the will itself is free. It's not about whether we're able to do what we will, what we want. It's about whether our will is free to be what something different than it is. Because if it was, then we would just be able to change our desires in any way, shape, or form, nullify addictions, and all kinds of things.
Yeah. And so again, so like the importance of this issue of people not being able to like maintain their weight and then people not being able to lose weight. I mean, like it to a great extent, other people blame them, and I think it's more likely that if a person's like overweight, even like sometimes if a person's, well, maybe with alcoholism it might be a bit different, drug addiction, but with overweightness, I think a lot of people will say, well, I have a glandular condition. I have something in me is not allowing me to lose this weight, or something in me, made me put on this weight. And I think people will, I think it's a powerful way, simple way for people to finally get it. And again, because, fat shaming is prevalent in our society, you have a whole, and actually a pretty huge majority of people that I think are, would really, gravitate to this. Yeah, no, we don't have a free will, at least, relative to losing weight. I mean, so yeah, or keeping it off.
Yeah, and it's an important thing because what we would like to get is now there might be people who they'll never come to the full understanding that free will is a total illusion, just totally incoherent. But we may still be able to stop the fat showing. We may still be able to take away the blame and the guilt from people who have been blamed for being fat, for example.
Chandler, I've got an idea. When I published my last book on climate rescue capitalism, I did a survey, in White Plains here. I asked people, a question about it, and I included it in the book. You might want to like maybe like at a supermarket, whatever. I'm not sure if it'd be appropriate to ask people who are overweight, especially strangers. But you might, want to ask, like, take an informal survey, ask people who are like not overweight, you know, just say, I'm doing a survey for, let's say a blog post you're going to present or something, or a video you're going to do. And you ask them, like, do you believe that, that people who are not slender, who are not slim, do you believe it's in their control, or what, or ask them maybe like, what do you think is the difference between people who are able to like maintain their weight and people who become overweight? And then like they may, because this might be maybe a 2 or 3 part survey. Then let's say they say to you, well, the people who maintain their weight and don't lose weight have more willpower. These people who gain weight just have weak wills. So then the second follow-up question might be, well, what do you think is responsible for some of us having strong enough wills to maintain our weight, and some of us not having strong enough wills? And that's where it's like they may say, well, that depends on like how we were raised. Let's say if our parents were overweight and they didn't really care about overweightness, then maybe we didn't care. But do you see how, like, if we were to conduct a survey, within 2 or 3 or maybe 4 at the most questions, we could probably get people to understand, to figure out for themselves that, maintaining one's weight, or gaining weight, really isn't something that's fundamentally up to us.
Yeah, that's a brilliant idea. Yeah, because I think, yeah, this whole willpower thing, because that's what a lot of people say is that some people have more willpower, and I mean, of course, I find so many different problems in that line of reasoning, but if we can get to, well, then why does one person have more willpower than another? you know because because here's the deal, then you've got it, because either there are causes prior to that person's existence even that led to them having more or less willpower than another, or they would say it happens for no reason, it's a causal. Either way, the person is not responsible for their level of willpower.
Exactly. Or another thing some people might say is like, well, those people, those of us who maintain our weight, we just care more about ourselves. We like ourselves more. We love ourselves more. You know, those other people who are overweight, they unfortunately don't care about themselves. How some people don't care about how they dress and stuff. And then, but Chandler, again, if they say that, it's the same thing. Then you ask them the follow-up question. All right, so why do you think some people care enough about themselves to maintain a healthy weight, and others of us don't?
Yeah, George, you're right. It's the same thing, because then we're getting into the causality of it. Well, then why do these people care more about themselves? Why do these people care more about their health than somebody else? And then once again, it's always putting the question back on them, because I think, George, part of the problem with my approach, it has been making too many statements and not asking enough questions, because it's more like, by asking people questions and getting them to think about the causes of why things are the way they are. That's how we learned, isn't it?
Chandler, that's an excellent point. I lead a lot of discussion groups on this, and I've debated a lot of people in New York City and Manhattan about this, like in Central Park. And you're right. When you ask people to think it through for themselves, they can so much better understand than if we just like tell them. That's very important.
Yeah, because as much as it's so easy to explain the simple logic of causality or acausality, being the only ways things can happen, while it makes perfect sense, some people, they really have to go through this process where you ask them questions, because that way they don't get defensive about it you
Yep.
know because then they think, oh, well, yeah, they're asking me my opinion on this, so they'll think it through, and that's good because otherwise, they tend to get combative. If you say anything that goes against the way that they've been taught to believe all their life.
Okay, all right. So here's the thing. So like, um, consider taking this on as a project because like this project would have two kinds of discoveries in mind. You know, and you do this in your leisure and stuff. You might ask one or two or three people a day, who knows, whatever. But like what happens is like you would first kind of like you know the, find out how many steps does it take a person to begin to understand that maintaining our weight or being overweight isn't really up to us. And the second part of this is how many different answers do you get? Another answer might be, um, well, because it's biological. Some people have healthy metabolisms, other people don't. But the idea is, it'd be interesting to see how many different answers people offer, how many steps it takes, and again, you could kind of like keep a running tally, and create videos about it, and like with updates and all. I think this would be an amazing project, or just like write about it in a blog and all.
Yeah, it's an interesting thought because what would be interesting is that because some things they just tend to go viral. Like if somebody like if there's an organized list of questions in the right order, that gets people thinking, and then we could have it on a blog, we can have it in video descriptions on YouTube, we can have it in Facebook notes and post it in Facebook groups, and stuff like that. Then that allows us to get comments from all different groups of people, and you get to see their answers to each of the questions. They can copy paste and you could have polls too, about certain things. I suppose I'm not sure how that would work, but yeah, where people can write the response to each of those questions, and this reveals a lot. And then we could even have these. Well, yeah, we could on the podcast. We could anonymously share the responses people give to these different questions, and this will reveal how people think to us, so we know what's really going on in their heads, what they're thinking about these things.
Yup, and another approach is like, I'm guessing that like if you would ask, let's say, 50 or 100 people, that you'd only come up with maybe seven or eight or nine different kinds of explanations. Willpower, not caring about themselves. I mean, maybe I'm wrong. It might be 10, 15, who knows? But I think it's a fairly limited number of different reasons. And then once we get these, after a while, we'll see that people are just repeating what other people have said. This would be a very cool thing for an infographic. I mean, Trick could actually just like put this together. If they say this, if they say willpower, then you ask them, well, why do some people have more willpower? If they say like, their biology, so again, and to determine how many steps it takes, I mean, I think that would be just, and if we get really creative, Chandler, if we hook up with somebody who has computer programming skills, or actually, I think it's pretty easy to create apps these days. I think I looked into it on the internet, and they have, I think, programs for creating apps. But we might want to create an app that is like the the no free will app, or the how to understand that no, we don't have a free will, and we use this weight gain thing as our whatever. I mean, the programming might be a bit difficult. In other words, like it would have to be some kind of a word recognition program that like well, no, we could actually, if we have, let's say, um 10 different reasons people offer. I don't know, it might get complicated, but again, just another vehicle. So like what we were saying before, not to tell them, not to explain to them why we don't have a free will, but to lead them step by step to figuring it out on their own.
Yeah, this is great idea, George, because what we can do is we're gonna see that certain people have certain responses. And just like, when you've written your books on free will and when Trick wrote his book and when he writes his blog posts, he is already in each post, he already knows what people are going to say in response to some of his posts, for example. So then he responds to that as well, because we're familiar with all the responses people give. So what's going to happen is, as it grows, there will be more questions. People will answer in such ways which will enable us to form better questions based on those answers.
Yeah, well, and you want to know, Chandler, here's the thing. Regardless of what their answer is, our answer is always the same. In other words, like, let's say, well, some of us have stronger willpower, right, than others of us. And the ones who don't have stronger willpower, they're the ones who gain weight and can't lose it. Then they answer to the second question we ask them, okay, what is it that causes some people to have greater willpower than others? Let's say they offer a different explanation. Let's say it's about, again, like the example of some people like themselves more or care about themselves more. So whatever it is, we ask the same question. What is it that allows people to be that way, that allows them to keep the weight off or lose it, as opposed to the alternative? It's always, you see how it's always one question at each level, regardless of what they answer.
Yeah, because all we have to do is like, well, what's the cause of that?
Exactly, exactly. Or what is this? They, whatever they say, well, this person, like, again, keeps the weight off because, and regardless of what they say, then the question is, well, why is it that this person was able to be that way, whether it was upbringing, whatever, and the other person wasn't?
Yeah, well, here's another thing, George. Now, you mentioned earlier, like this healthy weight, this diet thing being part of a moral issue, like it being a moral question, which is actually something I never heard. You mentioned that earlier in this podcast, and maybe you could clarify that a little bit.
Well, think about it. Being healthy, like, let's eating unhealthy, eating too many unhealthy foods. I think people would say that that's really, that's abusing our bodies. That's like not taking good care of ourselves. If we want to be good people, one of the things that involves is to be healthy, to stay healthy, to not, you know, drink too much or not eat too much and all that. So I think this is definitely, in one sense, a moral issue also.
Well, yeah, it's an interesting point because when you consider it from a health perspective, and if some people are eating unhealthy, then that leads to certain diseases, certain health problems, which can kill them. So it's about this is about pleasure and pain once again. It always comes down to the pleasure and pain thing. So we would say something is bad, wrong, or immoral because it's going to cause pain in the future if they do that. And so it is, you might, as I might say, the pro-life thing to do to care about your health, as well as others, So yeah, that's the important thing. So yeah, it is a moral issue in that sense. And I wish people saw it more as that way instead of just being some attractiveness thing. Because with some people, it's just kind of like, oh, well, I want to lose weight so I can be sexy or some kind of crazy thing like that.
Sure.
Which, uh,
And Chandler, getting back to, like, our kind of like compiling this data in terms of like how many steps it takes with each reason for people to generally get it and how many reasons people offer for this. This would be a great thing on Facebook. I don't know how many friends you have, but like, the Facebook poll, like you ask a basic question. Um, what, why why are some people able to maintain their weight and other people not? So you get answers, and then, like, based on, I guess you could go one by one, because let's say you get five different answers to your first poll. Then you just choose one and go with it until, let's say, people get that, because hopefully people will follow along. And maybe Mitch, with our Twitter account, could do the same thing, like a quick tweet. What explains, how do you explain, under this free will thing, that some of us can maintain a healthy weight and others can't? Again, because, like, I think what we're trying to do is we're trying to figure out how many possible answers people will likely come up with. And again, I think there might be some outliers, that one or two people might come up with very unique answers that nobody else would think of. But I think in general, the vast majority of people would just gravitate to maybe 5 or 10 different kinds of answers. And
Yeah,
that,
this is great, George, because what we can do is we could start out as sort of like Facebook questions that are asked, and then people will have different answers to that. And we can do it as a series of different questions. And what we can do is we can record the comments people, copy paste the comments that people are giving, and try to make it in such a way that all this is retained, so we can really study the results. Another great thing is now Facebook, Google Plus, and Twitter are great, but it's so easy for things to get lost as new posts come, the old posts go to who knows where. So what would be really awesome to do is perhaps have these questions as part of a video, and here's another idea, to include them in like the video description, or even the podcast descriptions, especially while we're doing this series on the belief in free will and its connection with the obesity issue, so that each time people read the description or whatever, they get to see the same set of questions, and of course it can be edited as we go along to be the clearest questions that get people thinking the most. But yeah, it's something that it could be done in stages, and it wouldn't be that hard to do, I wouldn't think.
yeah, and I just thought of another strategy, Chandler. I think among our group, again, there's got to be one of us who can create an app. And so, like, let's say, with our let's say we start doing this on Facebook, or you start doing this at a supermarket or something, and we start getting the data. And let's say for the first question, the first stage, we get, let's say, 15 answers, right? So in the app, in the first question is like, the first question is, why do you think some people gain weight and aren't able to lose it, while others don't gain weight, or if they gain weight, they're able to lose it, right? That's the first question. And then you give them a multiple choice of the 15 possible answers people have given before. And then you ask them to choose which of these, they believe answers the question most correctly, right?
Yeah.
So they pick one, then that takes them to the next screen. And then, like, again, this is going to take us a while to come up with these, different answers that people give for the different reasons. But, I think we'll probably find that it won't take more than 2 or 3 or 4 steps for people to finally get it.
Yeah, this is very exciting because yeah, what's really great is, yeah, I mean, it could start out as, posts on social media or on blogs and stuff, these questions, allowing people to comment. But it's true, once we've got it perfected the way we want, we could try to find some way to get it turned into an app or some kind of a thing. Like, I know that there are, I know like Facebook has this weird thing where you can make quizzes and stuff. I did this a long time ago, like where people, anybody doesn't have to know any programming skills. They just have these questions, and they can, and I guess they can put these multiple choice options and stuff that people can select of them. So I mean, lay people can do this. If I forgot how when that did, I just remember that was years ago. The technology was already out there, so somebody could do that and make their own little quiz, their own little polls of that kind of thing.
Yeah, Chandler, if I remember correctly, Facebook does have a poll feature. There's one of the options, post, on the status a poll. Absolutely. And it is very streamlined. You decide how many options you have. You decide on the question, and you could have like two options, three options. You could have it open ended. You could have them just write down the answer for the first stage. And once you get answers, yeah.
Yeah, this is a really cool idea. Yeah, and we'll see what the other co-hosts think of this idea too. Maybe now you're really good at coming up with these questions, so maybe what you might want to do is you could write some of these questions down that you were brainstorming.
No, but Chandler, here, the idea behind this is like we get our answers. I mean, the first question, we only really have to start this with one question. The question is like we ask, Facebook, or maybe we put it on Yahoo Answers or something. Um, why do you think some people are able to maintain their weight and not become overweight, whereas others can't? Okay, just one simple question. That's all we have to start with. And then once we get answers, let's say we get 5, 10 different answers to that, right? Then again, it's so simple because whatever it doesn't matter what they say, right? What answer they come up with, our response is always the same. The second tier or level of questions would be, well, then why is it that some people are the way they, however they explain it, and other people aren't?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, yeah, we just need to start with one question. So, okay, so our question's gonna go like, I guess, why are some people able to lose or lose weight or maintain a healthy weight while others are not?
Yes, very simple. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's simple. That is simple, and yeah, there's Yahoo Answers, there's Quora, which is for some reason very popular. I've used it just a little bit. Yeah, so it'd be something to put out there and see how people respond to that.
Yeah, and Chandler, what we might want to start out with, because one of our aims is to reach a limit on how many answers people give, whether it's 10, 15, however many it is. So for the first question, we might say, you know, you can give more than one answer to this. If you think that there's a main reason, give that answer. But if you think there are other reasons, give those also.
Yeah, yeah, there can be many reasons, obviously, many
Hmm.
many different answers, which can
Well,
actually all be correct too.
but Chandler, here's the thing. Um, I'm not sure there's going to be that many. You know, think about it. People will say like the willpower. People might say the morality. People might say that, well, some people come from families where their parents are overweight. I think there's a limited number of answers.
Yeah.
I doubt it's going to like exceed 20. Yeah.
And I already know one of the answers people are going to give. They're just going to say, "Oh, because they chose to, and others did not choose to with their free will." That we're going to see answers like that, I'm sure.
Right, but then our next question to that is like, all right, so why is it that some people choose to maintain their healthy weight and not, and others don't? You see, it's like, I mean, it's so brilliant because our answer is always the same regardless of what they say.
Yeah, yeah, I see what you're saying, George. This will be a very interesting experiment.
Yeah, and who knows? I mean, we really, this app thing would be so cool too, because like we can figure out, just put out an app there. I mean, it wouldn't have to be a money making thing. Who knows? We could, you know, whatever. But That would just like to a way of leading people through the reasoning.
Yeah. Yeah, this is really cool. Yeah, and I'm glad this is all recorded too, because it's been a great conversation. um, so yeah, because what it all comes down to, when we ask people, why are some people able to lose weight or maintain a healthy weight, then we're going to get people thinking about the causality of this, because there's going to be such I think, like you said, there's going to be a certain number of answers that people can give. There's only so many floating around that people commonly give. So once we've seen them all, we'll be able to respond to each of them too. We can have an organized system of how we go about this too. But like you said, it's always the same thing. Well, why do they have more willpower? Um, all that kind of stuff.
And that's the beauty of this. Yeah. In other words, like it doesn't matter what they say. With the answer, our next question is always, all right, so yeah, why do some people have this and others not? And
Yeah.
I've used this. I've used this at in my Manhattan meetup. Again, it usually doesn't take more than or four steps where people begin to understand, oh, something that really isn't in their control, like their upbringing, how their parents raised them, or like their biology or whatever. People begin to get it in 3 or 4 steps.
Yeah, I think it'll work. I mean, and it's very interesting because there's two sides of this as well, because there's the people who have never had a problem with the obesity, and those who have had a problem. So there's going to be two different kinds of people coming at it from a whole different viewpoint, and that may, of course, some will give us more of one type of answer than another will, I'm sure.
Chandler, that's a great point. I think the answers that overweight people give are going to be, generally different from the answers that more slender people give. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. This is incredible.
I think we've hit upon something. I think because like first, I think we're focused on an issue that at least a majority, perhaps 2/3 of the American population can relate to, and that cares about this fat shaming thing is an issue. The second thing is like we've it's a kind of like a method, like you were saying, it's a method by asking questions to get people to arrive at the answer rather than us telling them. And the last part is like it's so simple. It regardless of what they say, our part in it is always so simple and the same.
Yeah, it really is simple, George. I mean, it's not like we're just a bunch of geniuses or something. I mean, this is simple stuff.
Well, yeah, and then naturally, actually, we might, as a second question, which is a good another way to get people to understand that we don't have a free will, is like the question we could pose is like, why do you think some people understand that we don't have a free will and others believe we do? Because it would be think about it, it'd be the exact same formula. Whatever answer they come up with, we have the same question.
Yeah, I mean, it works for just about any topic. Yeah, I mean, you could do that with climate change denial too. You could say, well, why do some people believe that climate change is happening and other people don't?
Right. But I think if we focus on the overweightness, just to give this issue, you know, when we focus on that, then I've found that if we lead with that, then other people, other bloggers, other video bloggers, and all will just like begin to promote that same idea also. That's one of the ways that, in Malcolm Gladwell's Tipping Point, that he explains how things that start out with a few people and all of a sudden something happens where everybody gets it, or everybody's doing something, or everybody's buying something.
Yeah, like a meme.
Exactly, exactly. Yep.
Yeah, so yeah, I think we kind of know what direction to head in as far as this questioning thing goes, and I'm sure we'll continue to talk to our co-host tomorrow afternoon too for more episodes and stuff.
Chandler, you know what I think we should do?
But
I think, I'm not sure how many of our co-hosts will listen to this one. Not enough to have time and all, but I think we should just basically have this, this strategy, this campaign that we're developing to be the theme of tomorrow's podcast.
yeah, 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 we can go over the details of more how we're gonna do this in tomorrow's podcast as well. It was just kind of cool. You proposed the idea in this episode, but we can mention it again to the co-hosts whether or not they've listened to this one by then.
Right, and the good thing is, like, we can brainstorm. We've come up with some good ideas, but if we open up to the group, I'm sure they'll come up with things that we haven't thought about.
Oh, I'm sure. They're all full of ideas. Yeah. Okay. So, let's see. Was there anything more we needed to cover in this episode, or?
Um, no, let me think. So again, we want to like let's think in terms of logistics. I think an app for this would be so cool. It would be like something that's titled the No Free Will app, and under the description, this app leads you to through a step-by-step process to understand that nobody has a free will and absolutely nothing that we ever think, say, whatever, and so like the app is one thing. um, we might want to like explore other ways to get a lot of answers to this. Again, like, Facebook, see what sites invite questions like this. What sites are maybe dedicated to offering polls.
Yeah, because I mean, I know it's popular. There's so many different. There's a lot of websites out there where people create an account and ask questions, and it emails people whenever somebody answered their question, and then people reply to the answers. To be, that's how Quora works. That's how Yahoo Answers works. And I happen to have a Yahoo account already that I hardly ever use.
Excellent. Again, the idea is like this would go in several stages. The first stage is information gathering. We want to know how many first stage answers there are to our first question. And once we get 10 or 15, then naturally, then we'll start, with the more complex things. So like, let's say, well, yeah, the next polar survey would say like, um, why is it that some people have more willpower to not gain weight than others? And then, this will take us maybe who knows, a good 6 months to really come up with like a 3, 4 tier, maybe 5 tier structure for this.
Yeah, well, we're gonna have fun while we do it.
Oh yeah.
We're having so much fun with this podcast.
Yeah, and the good thing about this, Chandler, is like part of what we're trying to do is figure out a puzzle, because like to us it just like it makes so much sense that we don't have a free will. We're first trying to figure out why don't other people get this, and then the other thing is like what can we do to help them get it. And part of this has to be about like the logistics, whether it's like, the polls on Facebook, the app and all, just what kind of mechanisms do we have to kind of like create and utilize, to help people understand.
Yeah, and it's really very interesting, George, because I actually am still very confused about why people really want to believe in free will. I don't get it because it's very clear that their free will that they think they have is not even allowing them most of the time to do the things they want to do. Not that that would be free will. It's not the same as free will, but if it doesn't let you, eat less or change certain things that you would like to change, then what good is it? It's useless.
Chandler, I think that could be the subject of an entire book. Because like you have philosophers, some psychologists, mainly philosophers, who've dedicated decades to this question. They've written books about it. You know, they've given talks. And it is bewildering how these people, I mean, they have PhDs, they have academic careers, they've been studying this year and year. You're right. How do they not get this? It's a huge, huge mystery.
Yeah, it's weird because I used to think that, well, I mean, I still think that in general people what they believe is based on what they want to believe something is true or not, which is why they're motivated to believe a certain thing regardless of the logic. But it does, like, I don't see psychologically why somebody would want to believe in free will now, but now maybe it's because I'm on the other side. I can no longer think in the old way.
Right? Chandler, I was like, we probably want to end this in about 4 minutes or so. I guess we're going on to the hour.
Yeah.
But I just had another idea. We have our free will, science, and religion WordPress, or we have the forum, right? The discussions forum site.
Yeah, that's right. In fact, I believe I included the link to the forum. I might have included it in the recent group email, and I'm going to be including that in like the video descriptions when I upload it to YouTube and stuff. So people will be able to find the forums and participate in our discussions on this.
All right, but here's the thing. So, like, let's say create a thread, right? Um, the question is like, why are some people able to maintain a healthy weight and not gain weight and other people not, right? And then like send a group email to all of us in this podcast, all of us hosts, that link. And so like, we can try to figure out however as many answers as we can come up with ourselves. We don't necessarily have to rely on the public, which I think just speed up the process so much more, and I think it'd be a fun part of the project.
You're right. All the co-hosts can participate in this. We'll start with us and then extend it to the public after that.
Absolutely. I mean, we can do both. There's no reason we can't do both,
Well,
right?
well, well, yeah. I mean, as far as I know, there's no one holding a gun to our head. Even though know it's already predetermined what we will end up doing.
Yeah, the funny thing is like, so we have to wait to see what happens, right? Because it's not up to us.
Yeah, I wonder what we're gonna do because I really don't have any idea. Okay, well, I guess that's a kind of good note to end this podcast on. So, you've been listening to Free Will, Science, and Religion with Chandler Klebs and George Ortega, and we've been talking about the obesity problem and the fat shaming and its connection with the belief in free will. And we're going to be continuing this in many future episodes. So I hope that you enjoy listening to us as much as we enjoy talking about it. Thank you for listening, and goodbye.